The idea of going on a trip with my brother's friends didn't thrill me at first. I was the quiet one in the family, content to stay home, read, or vanish into my thoughts. My brother, Ayan, was the opposite, loud, confident, and effortlessly social. When he told me his friends had rented a cabin by the lake for the weekend, I half expected him to laugh when he said, "You should come with us." But he didn't. He looked sincere, maybe even a little protective. So, against instinct, I agreed. The next morning, I found myself squeezed into the back seat of his car, surrounded by laughter that didn't include me. Music blasted through the speakers, and jokes flew past me like a language I didn't speak. There was Saad, the loud one with endless stories, Hamza, quiet but quick-witted, and Daniel, the one who made the smallest spaces feel charged. Daniel was different. He wasn't as talkative as the others, but when he did speak, everyone listened. His voice carried an ease, his smile a quiet confidence. I'd met him only once before at our house, when he'd helped Ayan move some boxes. That day, he'd greeted me with a warmth I wasn't used to. Now, sitting across from him in the car, I could feel his occasional glances like sparks in the air. The drive took hours. Mountains rose around us, and the city fell away like a memory we didn't need. By the time we arrived, the sun was dipping behind the hills, painting the sky in streaks of amber and violet. The cabin stood near the water, simple, wooden, and surrounded by pine. It smelled of old wood and last winter's fire. Inside, the air buzzed with the energy of freedom. They threw their bags down, claimed rooms, opened snacks, and joked about everything. I lingered at the doorway, unsure where to fit in. Then Daniel caught my eye. "You can take the smaller room," he said, pointing with a smile. "It's quiet. You look like someone who likes quiet." I nodded, maybe too quickly. "Yeah, I do." That was the first time I noticed how easily he read people, or at least, how easily he read me. Later, as night settled, we gathered outside by the fire pit. Saad grilled something questionable, Hamza played music softly from his phone, and Ayan talked about college memories, half of which involved Daniel. They'd been friends for years, I realized. Maybe even best friends. That thought settled in my chest strangely, though I didn't know why. Daniel sat across from me, his face half-lit by the flames. Every so often, he looked up, his eyes catching mine for a heartbeat too long. I looked away each time, pretending to focus on the smoke curling into the dark. Ayan noticed my silence. "You okay, bro? You're quiet as always." I forced a smile. "Just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was watching. Watching how Daniel leaned back, how he laughed softly instead of loudly, how his words seemed deliberate, like each one had weight. There was something magnetic about the calmness he carried. When the fire began to die, the conversation drifted into small confessions, the kind people make when the night feels safe enough. Saad talked about a girl he couldn't forget. Hamza admitted he wanted to quit his job. Then Daniel said quietly, "You ever feel like you're living the wrong version of your life?" The question silenced the group for a moment. Ayan threw a twig into the fire. "That's too deep for tonight, man." Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe." His gaze flicked toward me, lingering for a breath too long before shifting back to the flames. Later, when everyone went inside, I stayed out a little longer. The night was still, the lake catching the moon like a secret. I thought about his words. The wrong version of your life. Maybe that was why I'd come, to see what the right one felt like. When I finally went in, the others were asleep, their laughter echoing faintly in my head. I lay on the small bed in my quiet room, the air smelling faintly of pine and smoke. Through the thin wall, I could hear Daniel's low voice talking to Ayan, then a soft laugh, then silence. My chest felt heavy and restless. Something was unfolding beneath the surface, something unspoken, delicate, and a little dangerous. I turned toward the window, watching the faint reflection of the moon ripple across the lake, and wondered what the night ahead might still hold. The cabin was silent except for the soft ticking of the old wall clock. Everyone had gone to bed hours ago. The fire outside had burned to ash, leaving the faint scent of smoke seeping through the open window. I lay awake, my mind restless, turning over Daniel's question from earlier like a stone I couldn't put down. Are we living the wrong version of our lives? Sleep wouldn't come. The air felt too still, too heavy with unfinished thought. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweatshirt and stepped into the dim corridor. A line of amber light leaked from beneath the door to the living room. Daniel was there, alone, sitting on the couch, a mug in his hands. The glow from a small lamp softened the angles of his face. He looked up as I entered, a hint of surprise replaced quickly by an easy smile. Couldn't sleep? He asked that I shook my head. You. Same. He gestured toward the couch. Come sit. The night's too quiet to waste sleeping through it. I hesitated but joined him. The room smelled of pine and rain. Outside, the wind brushed against the glass, whispering through the trees. Daniel handed me a cup of tea that had long gone cold. We didn't speak for a while. The silence between us felt oddly full, like something waiting to be said. I used to come here a lot, Daniel said finally. Whenever life got messy. It's easier to breathe when you can hear yourself think. I glanced at him. What's messy now? He let out a low laugh. Everything. Work, people, expectations. You ever feel like you're pretending to be someone that everyone else approves of? I nodded slowly. Every day. That made him look at me, really look. His expression softened, curious, almost kind. You're quieter than your brother, but I think you notice more than anyone else here. I just don't always know what to say. You don't have to, he replied. Sometimes silence says everything. For a moment, that silence stretched again, deep and delicate. The lamp flickered. The clock ticked on, marking time that neither of us seemed willing to move through. Daniel leaned back, his gaze distant. Ayan's lucky, he murmured. Why? He's got people who understand him. I envy that sometimes. I studied him, the way his eyes seemed thoughtful, the way his words carried an undertone of loneliness I hadn't noticed before. He wasn't as composed as he looked. Beneath the calm, there was weariness, an ache he didn't show anyone else. That I said quietly, maybe people understand you more than you think. He smiled, faintly, but didn't answer. The air between us shifted, small, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. The warmth in the room felt heavier, the kind that pressed against the ribs. That a creak sounded from somewhere down the hallway. We both froze, listening. Then Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. Old cabin, he said, his voice low. Makes a noise for every secret it hears. The tension broke into a fragile ease. He looked at me again, this time with something unspoken in his eyes, not invitation, not confession, just a quiet understanding. You should get some rest, he said after a while, standing. Long drive back tomorrow. I nodded, though part of me wanted to stay. He turned off the lamp, and the room fell into shadows. For a second, only the outlines of his face caught the moonlight filtering through the window. Good night, Isa, he said, my name, spoken softly, almost carefully. Good night, Daniel. Back in my room, I lay staring at the ceiling, the rhythm of my heart beat louder than the wind outside. Nothing had happened, yet everything felt altered. His voice lingered in my head, each word replaying with quiet intensity. That I thought of the way he'd said my name, as though he understood something I hadn't said out loud. A strange calm mixed with unease filled me. It wasn't desire or guilt, it was awareness. Awareness that something between us had crossed an invisible line, even if neither of us could define. I teed up. By the time I closed my eyes, dawn was already teasing the edges of the sky. The trip had begun as my brother's invitation, but the night had turned it into something else entirely, something that would not be easily forgotten. Morning arrived gently, with pale light spilling through the curtains and the distant sound of birds outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and sharp, the world outside washed clean. I opened my eyes slowly, unsure of what time it was, or what I might find when I turned my head. Ayan was already awake. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor as though lost somewhere else. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, but his stillness was new, a kind of quiet I had never seen in him before. For a few seconds, I just watched him, the same way I had watched the wedding lights flicker the night before, caught between admiration and uncertainty. Then, sensing my gaze, he turned slightly. "Morning," he said. His voice was calm, maybe too calm. "Morning," I echoed. Neither of us mentioned the night. The silence between us wasn't heavy or awkward, it was careful, as though we both knew that saying the wrong thing could shatter something fragile. That he stood and stretched, glancing at the window. "Looks like the wedding's over," he said, forcing a small smile. "The world's back to normal." I wanted to believe that, to let his words carry us back to the easy friendship we'd always had. But normal felt distant, like a place we'd already left without realizing it. When he went to wash up, I sat there listening to the water run. The sound felt strangely symbolic, as if the night were being rinsed away, leaving us both clean but changed. That we joined the rest of the family for breakfast. No one noticed our quietness, everyone was too busy packing, laughing, reminiscing about the wedding. Ayan slipped easily into conversation, joking with cousins, helping load bags into the car. He looked like himself again, bright, effortless, untouchable, and yet, every time our eyes met, there was that flicker, recognition of something shared, something unspoken. On the drive home, the road stretched endlessly ahead, flanked by fields shining with morning dew. We barely spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was filled with thought. I kept wondering if I should say something, to name what had happened, or to ask if he remembered it the way I did. But each time I opened my mouth, the words dissolved before reaching my tongue. Halfway through the journey, Ayan turned down the music and said quietly, "Last night was strange, wasn't it?" His voice was steady, but the way he gripped the steering wheel gave him away. "Yes," I said after a pause. "It was." He nodded slowly. "I don't know what it meant. He stopped himself, shaking his head with a soft laugh. "Forget it. Maybe it's better not to think too much." I wanted to agree, to let it go, but a part of me didn't want to forget. Some moments, I realized, are not meant to be understood, only remembered. That we reached home by afternoon. As he dropped me off, he smiled again, that familiar, easy smile I'd known for years. But his eyes lingered for a moment longer than usual. "Take care," he said. "You too," I replied. That he drove away, and I watched his car disappear down the road until it was gone. The emptiness that followed wasn't sadness exactly, more like the echo of a song after the last note fades. In the days that followed, we spoke less. Texts became shorter, calls more infrequent. Life filled the spaces where words didn't. Yet, whenever I thought of that night, it wasn't guilt I felt, it was a kind of gratitude. For the closeness. For the honesty of a moment that had no name. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the rain begins again, I think of that wedding, of golden lights, laughter, and a night that changed everything without saying a word. What we shared wasn't a mistake, nor was it something that could continue. It was simply a truth, brief, fragile, and unforgettable, that taught me how complicated love can be when it lives in silence. And though life went on, a part of me always returned to that single night, not for what happened, but for what it revealed. That even in the quietest moments, the heart speaks louder than words ever can.